The vote tally continues. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Karen Tumulty, national political correspondent for the Washington Post. David Drucker, reporter for Roll Call. And syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. David, you were over there all day. This seems to be that they're going to bring this thing if they have the votes, and it seems he has the votes. What's the inside skinny?
Well, adding that balanced budget component really seemed to turn the tide.
Balanced budget amendment added to this new version.
Correct. And so some of the debt limit increase would be tied to actual passage in Congress to the balanced budget amendment. Some members were calling this cut, cap, balance light. And I think that this second revised version and all of the wrangling combined was able to get it done. Now, I think everybody knows that this is going nowhere in the Senate. It'll get over there later tonight. It'll die. And
let me just interrupt you. As people are looking at this screen, 214 is the magic number. We're now at 200 to 195. Now, once you get to 214, it's not a final done deal until the gavel comes down and this vote is done. Sometimes, actually, lawmakers change their votes, and the vote changes. But 214 is the magic number tonight. Go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. So they're going to finally get this done, which I think is important for the Speaker's leadership, even though in some sense it's viewed as a defeat because of where he started at the beginning of the week and where he ended up. But at least he didn't hold a vote that failed. Then it goes to the Senate, and now what happens is actually a very open question.
Karen, thoughts on today?
Well, I was struck that the Speaker's final speech was as passionate as I think I've ever seen him, but there was one line in it where he kept saying, a lot of people in this town can never say yes. He was referring, of course, to the administration and the Democrats, but I think that could have applied just as easily to his own caucus.
Right. He was referring, Steve, to his negotiations with the president, saying numerous times that he stuck his neck out. And actually put revenues on the table. Now, he's saying this to a caucus which is adamantly opposed to any revenue increases, and he knows that he's going to have to take a bill that comes over from the Senate, as we're at 204 right now. He's going to have to pass that bill through a House that does not want what probably Senator Reid is going to give him.
Right, and I think he's saying this in part as a defense of the House Republican Conference, who's gotten bludgeoned in the media for, its intransigence over the past few days. But I mean, John Boehner, he's been criticized within his own conference as somebody who is too willing to work on a deal with President Obama. I think there are people among the House Republicans who thought Boehner spent too much time dealing with a man who was fundamentally never going to agree to reform entitlements and do the kind of spending cuts that needed to get done without revenue increases. So I think Boehner was, in that sense, a little bit defensive of himself and of the process that he's been through, but also in a broader sense of his caucus.
You and I were talking about last night how these numbers were coming together. We're at 207 yay right now. 214 again is the magic number. Behind the scenes, what you were getting and the arm twisting, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it was a very interesting process last night. I mean, you talk to people and they would tell you 2 votes. I talked to 3 people and they said, look, the Republicans are just 2 votes short in the House. And then you talk to other people and they'd say, no, it's many more than that. It's 5, it's 15. And it was a moving target, I think, for most of the night. In fact, I think there were times at which people, even in leadership, didn't actually have a good sense of where exactly the vote count was, but everybody understood that they didn't have the votes last night.
Which is why they yanked it off the floor. Charles, your thoughts, as we're at 208 now, on this day and what this means for Speaker Boehner and his speakership?
I think his speech was extremely interesting because I think he was playing 1 or 2 chess moves ahead of the game. He no longer had to be addressing the recalcitrants in his caucus. He knew he had the votes. That speech was the speech that you would make to the country when the Senate sits on its hands. We know the president doesn't have a plan. The Senate has, in theory, a Reid plan, but it's not a Senate plan. I think it's really important that the Republicans emphasize today it's no longer a Boehner plan. It's a House of Representatives. This is actually something that passed in one House of the Congress. So that's the live action. And I think the idea is to put the onus on the Senate where nothing has happened. Everything is killed in the Senate. It's a place where all bills that would solve this go to die. And the White House, where the president, even today, talking about the second stage of this process on debt ceiling, said that the second stage will be discussions on entitlements and tax reform. I'm willing to have a discussion. This man is still back in discussions, which he offered, I don't know, a year ago. But he discusses, he gives speeches, nothing is scored, nothing is estimated. He has nothing in a plan. in public, no cuts, nothing. I think if the emphasis on the House has acted, the Senate and the presidency, which are in the hands of Democrats, haven't, that's a winning argument.
We're under 6 minutes. The rest of this vote, we're at 211 yay, 203 no. Again, the magic number for passage is 214, and again, it's not official until the gavel comes down. Karen, the PR effort, it seems that the Democrats had a successful effort in painting the Tea Party conservatives as being somehow evil, recalcitrant, the problem, extremists. The president mentioned it today again. How has that gone, and will this turn that narrative around at all?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, tracking polls are very, they go up and down and up and down, but today the president hit 40% approval in the Gallup tracking poll, which is the lowest he has been. The fact is, Charles talks about the argument that they have now. I think the country is to the point where people don't want to hear an argument, they want to hear a plan, and time has basically run out.
David, we're at 213, one away from the number they need. Your thoughts on this discussion here?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that whatever you think about the Republicans' plans in the House, they actually passed 2 bills. And as we've gone down to the wire here and we're bumping up against the Tuesday deadline to raise the debt limit, I thought this was a great process if it would have started 6 to 8 weeks ago, and you could have had the House pushing through its plans. I mean, don't forget the Speaker, again, whatever you think of his plan, when it was clear that cut cap balance was dead, he went back and tried to come up with something that in theory at least could appeal to Democrats, or at least say, all right, I dialed it back a little bit. And if the Senate would have moved, and then the House would have, after the House, and we were 4 weeks ago, we would have maybe been in business for a legislative solution. On time.
Currently at passage, 214 to 204, 4 minutes left. If these numbers hold, and it looks like they will, this will pass the House. Charles, your thoughts?
I would agree that it would have been much better had the House passed this a month ago. But right now, what the Republicans can say is the House legislates, the President talks, and the Senate kills. Who's responsible here? Who's acting as an adult?
It's important to note that any lawmaker could change their votes, but we're at the magic number right now at 214. Steve, when you talk about the Tea Party conservatives, strategists will tell you that they have an argument that this linkage between the debt ceiling increase and any spending cuts would not have happened had they not been elected. So any of this concern or talk about this focus on the debt or reducing the size of government would not be happening if it was not for November 2010.
There's absolutely no question about that, and I think they deserve tremendous amount of credit for changing the conversation. I mean, you've heard this in some of the floor speeches over the past couple of days, where you look back at January, February of 2009, what Washington was focused on at that point was how much money can we spend and how fast can we spend it. And you fast forward to January 2011 after the historical change in November of 2010, and because largely of the Tea Party conservatives, you have changed the conversation so that the conversation, including the president, is how much can we cut and how quickly can we cut it. I mean, that is a dramatic change. Now, I would argue that in tactics, Tea Party conservatives made a mistake, and they made a mistake by not changing after cut cap and balance went down. I think it was the best program plan of substance to be offered, but they made a mistake by not going to the Speaker at that point and saying, what can we do to pass the most aggressive, the most conservative plan that we have in the House that could possibly pass the Senate. I think John Boehner at the same time had made a mistake earlier by spending too much time with the president and not spending enough time with that group in the House.
But Karen, because we're pushed up against this deadline that the Treasury Department says if we miss, we go over it, it's a financial calamity. That was a powerful anvil that Democrats used. Hammering down.
It was not just the Treasury that was saying that as well.
Wall Street, right, all kinds of folks.
Exactly. But I do think that yes, they have changed. The Tea Party has changed the conversation. But I think that for a lot of those people tonight, changing the conversation does not feel like a victory. And certainly, we saw people as recently as yesterday, Sarah Palin, sending out her Facebook posting saying, "Hang tough, and don't forget there are people out there who are willing to challenge you in a primary." So this is a pretty purist group of people.
But there's a paradox here.